I was a makeup artist for Jennifer Lopez. What happened just before she walked on stage still terrifies me to this day. It wasn't the lights, the cameras, or the applause that haunted me. It was something much darker. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I thought I was just doing my job, but what I witnessed in that dressing room changed everything. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I have to. There's a secret here, one that no one wants you to know. I can still feel it, that chill, every time I close my eyes. But it starts like this.
I've never said this out loud to anyone, but I need to tell someone, and maybe that someone is you. I've carried this with me for so long, and it's eating me up inside.
The night I worked with Jennifer Lopez, everything about that night felt wrong from the start. I've done my fair share of celebrity gigs, worked with plenty of big names, but this one, it wasn't like the others. I should have known then, but I thought it was just nerves. But there was something in the air that night, something off. I never expected what happened backstage that evening. I never thought a simple makeup session would be the thing that would haunt me for years. But I can't ignore it anymore. I can't keep pretending it didn't happen. It was a typical late spring night, and I was backstage at a huge venue. One of those massive arenas filled with too much glitz and noise. The kind where everything feels like it's meant to distract you from what's really going on behind the scenes. But there's this energy you can feel buzzing in the air, like something just isn't quite right, but everyone's pretending that it is. I was there to do makeup for Jennifer Lopez. I didn't care about her star power. She was just another job, another client to please. I've been doing this long enough to know that the glitz of it all doesn't matter. It's just a job. But walking into her dressing room was different. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it felt like I was stepping into a place I wasn't meant to be. The room was freezing. I could see my breath in the air. It was like they were cranking the AC to the max. But even then, it didn't explain the chill that wrapped itself around me as soon as I stepped inside. I was told to wait. Her team was running a little behind. But when you're backstage like this, you get used to waiting. Everyone's always behind. No big deal. But something else was there too. Something watching. I kept hearing little noises behind me, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps. But when I turned around, no one was there. And it wasn't the kind of noise that people make when they're rushing around getting ready for a show. No, this was different. It felt deliberate, like I was being watched. I shook it off. I had to, because, well, I had a job to do. But when she finally walked in, the room shifted again. And I'm not talking about the usual star energy or anything like that. No, this was different. When she stepped into that dressing room, Jennifer Lopez was off. She didn't greet me like a normal person. No hi or how are you? She just looked at me, stared at me, actually. It was like she was assessing me, not like a normal person would. Not like, hey, are you ready to get started? It was more like I was something she was examining, something she needed to figure out. And when she spoke, it wasn't a casual conversation. It was sharp. Her words were slow, deliberate. Make me perfect, she said. That's your job, right? Make me perfect. There's something about those words that made my skin crawl.
But I didn't let it show. I just nodded, set the brush in my hand, and tried to stay focused. Make her perfect. That's all I had to do, just make her perfect.
As I started working on her makeup, I noticed the strange way she moved. I mean, she was a professional, don't get me wrong, but there was something off about her. Her movements were smooth, too smooth, like they were calculated. I can't explain it any other way. They weren't natural. I'd never seen anything like it before. It was like her whole body was locked in place, too still, too controlled. I asked her if she wanted to relax a little while I finished up, but she didn't answer. She didn't even acknowledge the question. It was like she didn't hear me at all. Instead, she just stared at herself in the mirror, as if the reflection was holding her attention. Then, as I was finishing the last touches on her makeup, I noticed something strange. Her eyes, they were different. I know that sounds crazy, but her eyes, they were empty. They weren't her usual bright, fiery eyes. They were cold, empty, hollow. I could feel it in my chest, this tightening. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stop looking at her eyes. Something wasn't right. And it wasn't just the makeup. It was like she wasn't there anymore. And that's when it happened. I looked down at my makeup kit just for a second. And when I looked back up, she was standing. But her eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking through me, like they didn't even see me. And she whispered, just low enough that only I could hear. They're here. They're watching. I froze. My heart stopped. My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Was she talking about the crew? Or was she talking about something else? The room. It got even colder. The silence was almost suffocating. There was this weight pressing down on me, filling the room. I tried to brush it off. I tried to keep going, but I couldn't. I couldn't shake that feeling that I was standing too close to something I shouldn't be. Something dangerous. Something wrong. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. And then she walked out. I didn't hear the rest of her footsteps. It was like she vanished the moment she stepped out of that room. Like I was left in this void, alone. But as the seconds passed and the air slowly returned to normal, I realized something. I was not alone. Not really. I had seen something. Something I wasn't supposed to see. And now, I can't forget it. The thing is, I don't think she ever left that room. I think whatever it was, it came with her. And I can't stop wondering if I'm next. I stepped into the dressing room, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Or at least, it seemed like it was supposed to. The room was immaculate, almost too immaculate. Everything in place, as if the space had been designed for a life of luxury and perfection. The velvet curtains, a deep shade of royal purple, hung symmetrically on either side of a full-length mirror, their edges catching the light in soft folds. There was a couch, plush, inviting, with scattered cushions in gold and deep reds, as though this was where someone would relax and take a breath before the chaos of the stage. The air smelled faintly of jasmine, heavy yet comforting, with an undercurrent of something like expensive perfume, subtle, elegant. It was the kind of space you imagine a star like Jennifer Lopez would spend her moments of downtime in, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, beauty, and control. The polished wooden floor beneath my shoes creaked faintly as I walked, a sound that felt oddly personal for such an expensive room. At first, it felt like stepping into a fantasy, an oasis amid the hustle. I exhaled, thinking, this is it. This is what I'm here for. And then there was that quiet stillness that hung in the air. I tried to ignore it. The room was calming, but it felt a little too quiet, like the kind of quiet that only happens when everything is just a bit too perfect. The silence was thick, pressing against my skin, but the kind of silence that comes right before something important happens. I set my bag down beside the chair near the mirror and unpacked my brushes. They slid out smoothly. The soft swish of the bristles against the makeup case was the only sound breaking the heavy stillness. I glanced around again, not quite sure why I was still unsettled. The table in front of the mirror was pristine. Nothing out of place, even the tiniest specks of dust that tend to gather around such fine objects were absent. The makeup tools, neatly arranged in a perfect line, seemed almost staged, like someone had positioned them with precision. Even the light bulbs around the mirror were glowing in a soft, even pattern. No flicker, no shadows creeping in, no imperfections. I looked toward the corner of the room where a few shelves stood, lined with bottles of lotion, perfumes, and more mirrors. One of them was cracked, just a tiny sliver in the bottom corner, like a hairline fracture that you wouldn't even notice unless you were looking for it. But I did notice it. I always notice things like that. My stomach tightened for a second, but I quickly turned away, telling myself it didn't matter. I sat down in the chair and tried to relax. There was a faint buzzing sound from somewhere behind me, and I assumed it was just a fan or something of the sort trying to cool the air. But it wasn't the usual sound of a fan, the steady hum I was used to hearing. It was sharper, almost like a low drone, something that pressed in on my ears just loud enough to make me uncomfortable. I thought about turning around to see where it was coming from, but then the door opened, and she walked in. J.L.O. She moved with the kind of grace you only see in the most controlled performers. Each step was measured, precise, but there was something about the way she walked into the room, something deliberate in her movements that made my heart beat a little faster than usual. Maybe it was just nerves, maybe it was the pressure of knowing I was about to work on someone like her. But it felt like she wasn't just stepping into a dressing room. It felt like she was walking into something else. I stood up automatically, holding my breath for a split second. She didn't look at me right away. She didn't have to. She just moved toward the mirror, and for a moment, I saw it. The way she looked at her reflection. It wasn't the usual look of a performer before the crowd, adjusting herself, making sure everything was just right. Number. This was different. She was staring into the mirror, but she wasn't seeing herself. Not the way most people do. It was more like she was searching for something. For just a second, I thought her eyes flickered. Just a flash. Quick enough that I wondered if I imagined it. The air in the room grew heavier. It felt suffocating, like something was closing in. The light from the bulbs around the mirror seemed dimmer somehow, or maybe it was just the weight of the silence pressing down on everything. My palms started to sweat, and I caught myself rubbing them against my pants as I waited for her to speak. She finally turned toward me, her gaze cold and direct, but it wasn't the look of a star preparing for a show. It was something else, something empty. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low and smooth, but it didn't sound like the voice I was expecting. It wasn't warm or confident or commanding. It was almost like a command without any conviction, like she was asking the question because she knew she had to, not because she cared. I nodded, even though I felt a knot form in my stomach. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I moved toward her, brushing the air with my fingers as I grabbed the brushes from the table. I felt the buzz of the drone sound again, louder now, almost like it was coming from inside my head. I tried to ignore it, but it was there, pressing down on me, making the room feel smaller. Her eyes were on me again, and this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just looking at me. She was assessing me. I thought maybe it was just my nerves, but there was something about the way she was staring at me that made my skin crawl. The makeup I had prepared, the brushes, the products, all felt suddenly insignificant. I glanced over at the cracked mirror again. The tiny crack seemed to have expanded, just enough that it caught my attention, pulling my focus away from her. The room was starting to feel like a maze, like there was something deeper hiding in it, something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't dare look at her reflection again. I focused on my work, trying to stay calm, trying to ignore the way the room felt too still, the way the walls seemed to close in. But then, just as I applied the first layer of foundation, her voice broke the silence again. "They're always watching, you know." Her words were barely a whisper, like she wasn't even talking to me. I froze, brushed halfway to her face, and glanced at her. She didn't seem to notice. She was staring into the mirror again, her face expressionless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the room had changed, that something had just shifted, and I wasn't supposed to be here anymore. And just like that, the tension in the room became unbearable. The sound of her voice, her presence, the strange humming in the background. It all felt wrong. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything started to unravel. The moment she sat in the chair, I thought things might finally settle. Maybe it was just the nerves, or maybe it was the environment. But everything had started to feel strange. At first, the room looked almost welcoming, but now, the silence between us had thickened, like the kind of silence that fills a room when something unsaid lingers in the air. The room felt closed in, yet I couldn't explain why. It wasn't like the claustrophobia you'd expect in a small space. No, this was different. It was as if the air had somehow stopped moving. Everything felt too still. The temperature had shifted too. The cold I had noticed earlier, that low chill in the air, was back. It wasn't enough to make you shiver, but it had an effect. Like the room had decided to be uncomfortable, just slightly, just enough to unsettle you. I tried to focus, applying the makeup carefully, but every time I looked away, I felt eyes on me. It was impossible to ignore. Jennifer Lopez was in front of me, staring straight ahead into the mirror, but her expression was blank, like she was somewhere else entirely. I had worked with enough celebrities to know that some people get lost in the mirror, lost in the image they've created for themselves. But this felt different. She was too still, too distant. And then, as I worked, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A man standing just outside the door to the dressing room. He was tall, dressed sharply in black, blending into the shadows, almost like he was waiting. But for what? I wasn't sure. I didn't even see him enter, but there he was, just standing there, watching. I didn't say anything at first. I thought it was just one of her security team, or maybe a member of her entourage, but he didn't move. He just stood there, watching the room, watching me. His eyes didn't leave me, and I felt his gaze like a weight pressing on me, making every movement feel wrong. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just my nerves. But then, just as quickly as I noticed him, he was gone. I glanced at the door, and it was wide open. No one was there. I had a strange urge to check the hallway outside, but I stayed focused. The makeup session was almost done, and I was just about to move on to the next step when I heard the sound of a door clicking behind me. I didn't think much of it until I turned around and saw it. A door, one I hadn't noticed before. It was in the back of the room, tucked away behind some heavy curtains, and it was locked. The door was locked, and I couldn't even remember seeing it when I first came in. It stood there, standing tall and silent in the corner of the room. The wooden door was polished, its surface shining even under the soft lighting of the room. There were no labels or signs. It was just there. I tried not to look at it, tried to keep my focus on J-Lo's makeup, but the door tugged at my thoughts. Why was it locked? I mean, it was part of the room, wasn't it? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it led to something else, something hidden. The feeling of unease hit me again. That nagging sensation that there was something here that wasn't meant to be seen. I glanced over at her again, but her face was still motionless. She hadn't moved. I could see her eyes in the reflection of the mirror, but they were blank, not looking at me, not looking at herself. They were just empty. And then it hit me. The room was quiet again, that suffocating silence filling the space, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was the staff. One of her assistants walked in and out of the room, but their movements felt too rehearsed, too smooth. They didn't talk, didn't acknowledge me. It was like they had a role to play, and they were stuck in it, going through the motions without ever truly engaging with the space, the people, or each other. The air was thick with the sound of their footsteps, but they were always just out of sight. I'd hear them, but when I turned to look, they'd be gone. My pulse quickened, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it was just nerves again. Maybe I was imagining things. After all, I was working with someone who demanded perfection, someone used to getting everything just right. It was probably just the pressure of being in the presence of such a huge star. But even as I tried to reassure myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in the room had changed, that something was wrong. A soft clicking noise behind me made me jump. I turned to see one of the staff members closing the door to the locked room. She smiled, almost too politely, and said, "Everything's fine. Just making sure it stays secure." Her smile felt practiced. Too practiced. Like she was saying it because it was what was expected of her. But there was something about her words that didn't sit right. She said everything was fine, but the way she said it made it clear that it wasn't. And that locked door.
I wanted to ask. I really did. But something stopped me. The way she looked at me, like she was waiting for me to ask, but also like she didn't want me to. She wasn't threatening, but there was a subtle warning in her eyes. She was telling me not to dig, not to ask. But the feeling kept growing. The feeling that I shouldn't look too closely at that door. That I shouldn't question anything I saw in this room.
The hum from the lights overhead had started again, softer this time, like a pulse in the background. I could feel it vibrating through my skin, the soft, persistent buzz that seemed to come from nowhere. I glanced at the mirror, but the reflection didn't feel like it was mine anymore. J-Lo's eyes stared back at me, blank and unfeeling.
That was when I noticed it. The first crack in the illusion.
A moment of clarity, or maybe it was fear. Her eyes were no longer staring at me. They were staring through me. And for the briefest second, I saw something shift. Her expression didn't change, but I saw it. Something was different. Before I could say anything, before I could even react, the door to the room slammed open, and her assistant returned with a sharp, tight smile on her face. "It's time," she said flatly. And just like that, I was pushed back into reality. J-Lo stood up as if nothing had happened, as if nothing was wrong, and moved toward the door. I felt my chest tighten, my breath shallow. Everything inside me screamed to stop her, to ask what was happening, but I stayed silent. She glanced back at me once, her eyes cold, almost knowing. And then, without another word, she was gone. I sat in that room, the silence pressing in on me once again, and I realized whatever was behind that locked door, whatever she was, I was about to find out. But I had to wait, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next. I don't know when exactly it happened, but somewhere between applying her makeup and watching her assistant leave the room, I stopped believing this was just nerves. For the longest time, I thought it was all in my head. The cold air, the silence, the unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. But now, as I stood there in the dim light of her dressing room, the doubt was gone. I knew for sure that something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as though something was behind me, watching me. I tried to brush it off. It was probably just the stress, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more it grew. Jennifer Lopez had left the room, and her assistant had locked the door behind her. But the strange feeling lingered like a cold fog. The hum from the lights had grown louder, like it was pulsing through the walls. The air felt thinner, almost tangible, as if every breath I took was a struggle. And that door, the locked door, it was impossible to ignore now. My eyes kept drifting to it, and every time they did, the crack in the wood seemed to get larger. It was only a fraction of a millimeter, but it was enough to make me feel as though I wasn't supposed to be in here. Not anymore. I walked toward it, slow at first, as though I could distract myself by checking my makeup kit again, by fiddling with the brushes. But it wasn't working. There was no denying the pull of the door. The crack in the wood seemed to beckon me, a silent invitation to look inside, to know what was hidden behind it. I reached out for the handle. my fingers barely brushing against it when the door slammed open. Hard. I jumped back instinctively, my heart pounding. I hadn't touched it. I swear, I hadn't. The force of the door slamming open shook the room, rattling the light fixtures above. For a split second, everything seemed to hold its breath, suspended in time. There was no one on the other side. I stood frozen, staring into the empty, dark space beyond the door. The silence in the room thickened again, but this time, I felt it settle like a weight in my chest. The hairs on my arms stood up straight, and the faintest chill ran through me. I didn't dare move for a second. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But some force, kept me rooted in place. I finally stepped forward, my feet hesitant on the floor as I glanced over my shoulder. It wasn't like I was expecting someone to pop out from behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes. The feeling that someone, or something, was standing just behind me, waiting for me to turn around. I didn't. I stepped into the dark room. It was quiet, too quiet. And as my eyes adjusted to the shadows, I saw that it wasn't a storage room, as I had assumed. It wasn't an ordinary backstage room at all. The walls were lined with mirrors, but they were cracked, chipped in places, as though someone had tried to hide them with layers of paint and wallpaper. It didn't make sense. There was something about the room itself that felt wrong. The air tasted stale, the kind of air that feels untouched for years. As I moved deeper, I noticed something on the far wall, a shelf lined with what looked like framed photographs. I approached them, trying to calm the increasing tightness in my chest. The first one was a photo of Jennifer Lopez, just like you'd expect. Glamorous, posed, perfect. But as I turned the frame over, my breath caught in my throat. The back of the photo wasn't plain like you'd expect. It was covered with scribbled words, rushed, like someone had written in a panic. But it wasn't clear. It looked like someone had written and crossed out and rewritten, and I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I felt compelled to read it, even though the ink was starting to bleed, as if the words were becoming part of the paper itself. But I couldn't. I couldn't make sense of it. I set the picture down carefully, my fingers trembling. I didn't want to stay here. I didn't want to touch anything, but I felt like I had no choice. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I turned around, deciding to leave before something else happened. Before I saw something else I couldn't explain. But the door, the one that had slammed open a moment ago, was now closed. I hadn't heard it, but it was shut tight. The sound of it locking was unmistakable. I turned back to the room, trying to control my breathing, but it was no use. I was trapped. My eyes darted to the mirrors, the ones that had seemed like nothing more than decoration, nothing more than parts of the wall. But now they seemed like windows. They seemed like doors that had been waiting for someone to step through. And then it happened. One of the mirrors shifted.
It wasn't subtle. The entire frame moved. It wasn't a crack or a shadow. The mirror itself moved, slid, as if it were on a track that I hadn't noticed. For a second, the room was completely still, but that second stretched on. And I knew that something was about to happen.
I didn't wait. I ran for the door, my hands fumbling for the handle, but when I reached it, it was stuck. Stubbornly stuck. I didn't know what was happening. what had happened. But the room felt alive. The walls felt too close. The lights above flickered once, twice, and that hum became deafening. I tried again to turn the handle, panic rising in my chest. My heart was pounding in my ears. And then, just as I thought I was about to break the door open, I heard her voice. JLO. But it wasn't the voice I'd heard earlier. It was different. It was hollow, distant, and it came from the mirror. You shouldn't have come in, she said, her words slow and deliberate. The voice seemed to reverberate through the walls, through my bones. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a command. It was a truth. The door still wouldn't open. I could feel her presence behind me in the mirrors, her cold eyes, but they weren't hers. Not anymore. And then, before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shuffling behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing. I've seen a lot of things in my time. Things that would make most people turn away, maybe even run. But nothing like this. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. I thought the locked door, the strange whispers, the flickering lights, these were all signs of stress, of too much pressure. I'd been in this industry long enough to know that the glitz and the glamour were just masks. Everyone had their secrets, their quirks, and their pressures. I thought I could handle it. But this was different. I'm standing in the room, locked in, the door shut tight behind me, when something shifts. It's subtle at first, just a tickling sensation at the back of my mind. The kind that tells you that something's not quite right, but you don't know why. And for a moment, I try to ignore it. I look at the cracked mirror, the locked door, the faint shadow in the corner of the room that's barely there. And I tell myself, it's just nerves. You're fine. But I'm not fine. The hum that's been buzzing in the background for hours gets louder. I'm not sure if it's real or just in my head, but it grows, piercing through the air, vibrating in my skull. I feel it deep in my bones. It's not just the lights anymore. It's everything. The mirror, her mirror, has stopped reflecting the room. The reflection isn't even hers anymore. It's different. For a moment, I don't see JLO. I don't see anyone. There's only a twisted, blurry image, like something's been smeared across the glass, like a nightmare that's trying to force its way through. I reach out. My fingers barely graze the surface of the mirror, but the coldness of it burns through me like ice water. My stomach drops. I want to pull back, but something's pulling me closer. I can't stop myself. And then I hear it. Her voice, but it's not the voice I've heard all day. The one that sounds like a polished, practiced diva. Number. This is different. It's hollow. A whisper that's barely there, but it cuts through the tension of the room like a knife. You shouldn't be here. I freeze. The air turns colder. My heart races. I don't know if she's talking to me. I don't know if she's even here. My chest tightens. I turn around, but no one is in the room with me. There's no one. I spin back to the mirror, but the reflection's not the same anymore. Her face is twisted. Her eyes aren't just empty. They're black, like she's not even human anymore. My legs feel weak, like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. I want to scream. My voice catches in my throat. I want to run, but I can't move. I can't breathe. What the hell's going on? I step back, my feet stumbling over each other, and I hit the corner of the table. The noise sounds louder than it should, like the room is amplifying everything now. The cold from the mirror is still in my fingertips. The room feels like it's shrinking, the walls pressing in. The air is too thick, suffocating. I can't breathe. I try to shake it off. I've been here before. I felt anxiety. I've been under pressure. I've been alone in rooms where the tension was palpable. But this was something else. I felt like I was losing my mind. That's when I hear it. Again. This time, it's not from the mirror. It's from behind me. Leave. The voice is louder, sharper. It's hers, but it's not. It's hollow, distorted. I spin around, panic surging through me, my heart hammering in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, is the assistant. She's smiling, but it's not a smile. It's wide, too wide, stretching across her face in a way that isn't natural. Her eyes are empty, the same black as JLO's had been, and I freeze. She says nothing. She just stands there, her grin widening as she watches me. She doesn't blink. She doesn't move. She's not human anymore. The air in the room grows heavier. It feels like something's pressing on my chest, like the walls are closing in on me. I can't breathe. I can't think. I feel my mind starting to fracture, little cracks in the edges of my thoughts. I don't know what's real anymore. Is this a dream? Is this some kind of sick joke? And then the assistant steps forward. Her steps are slow, deliberate, but she doesn't walk like a person. It's like she's gliding, floating. The closer she gets, the darker the room becomes, as if her presence is sucking the light out of the air. No, I whisper, my voice trembling. No, no, no. I try to run, but my legs won't move. I feel rooted to the spot as if something is holding me in place. I scream, but it's a silent scream, one that's trapped inside my head, the sound stifled by the weight of the air. The assistant reaches out, her fingers brushing against my arm. Her touch is cold, not just cold, it's wrong. It burns through me like ice, searing into my skin. And then everything shifts. The room disappears. The walls, the floor, they're gone. There's nothing but blackness around me. The hum is gone. The cold is gone. But the pressure remains. I'm falling. I'm falling, and I can't stop it. The darkness is swallowing me whole, pulling me into it. And I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't move. I try to scream, but the air is thick, and the sound never comes. The assistant's face is there again, but it's not her anymore. It's something else, something twisted. And then her voice again, whispering through the darkness. You should have never come here. I close my eyes, but it doesn't matter. The darkness is still there, closing in. I'm trapped. I didn't know what happened first, the scream in my head or the rush of my legs carrying me toward the door, but suddenly I was running. My body was acting on its own, pushing forward despite the heavy, suffocating weight of terror that had already sunk deep into my chest. I don't know how I even moved. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and every step felt like it was dragging me deeper into the nightmare. But still, I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered in my chest, beating so loud that it drowned out the echo of the assistant's voice in my mind. You shouldn't have come here. That phrase kept repeating, bouncing around in my skull, getting louder the more I ran. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the air was thick with something. Something that wasn't just cold, it was alive, pressing on me, squeezing me, making every step harder than the last. The door that had locked behind me, I couldn't even remember how I'd gotten out. I ran down the hallway, barely even hearing the sound of my footsteps. My breath was ragged, choking in my throat. I wanted to scream, but it felt like I had no voice. My mouth was dry, my hands were clammy. Everything in me was shaking, trembling uncontrollably, as if I was being pulled into something I couldn't understand. I slammed my palm against the first door I found, almost knocking it off its hinges. I didn't care. I pushed through. The room in front of me spinning, my vision swimming in a haze. The noise, the hum that had been buzzing in my ears since the moment I stepped into that room. It hadn't stopped. It was growing louder, deeper, vibrating in my teeth. I tried to focus, tried to tell myself it was just panic, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but it felt so real. The room spun around me, and I staggered toward the closest window, my breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. My reflection was distorted, wrong. I saw myself, but I didn't see myself. It was like I was looking at someone else, someone who wasn't me, trapped in this body I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. My reflection didn't move when I moved. The shock hit me like a punch to the stomach. I froze. The reflection, my reflection, stayed still, staring back at me with a hollow, empty gaze. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd gone insane. Maybe I was already lost to whatever was happening in that room, in this building. But then it moved. Not the way I moved, but it moved. The reflection tilted its head, slow and deliberate, and a twisted smile crawled across its face. The sight of it was enough to make me stumble back, my body slamming into the wall behind me. I could feel the cold biting against my skin, the icy touch of it moving deeper into me, settling in my bones. I couldn't look away. The thing in the mirror, the thing that looked like me, stared. I stared. My reflection opened its mouth. The words came slowly, as if it was savoring them. You can't escape. The words were a slow, guttural whisper, curling through the space between us, slipping into my ears. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But I heard them. I felt them. And the reality of what I was seeing hit me harder than anything else. I was losing it. I was losing my mind. I turned away from the mirror, my heart in my throat, my legs shaking. I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in panic, in terror, in the weight of everything that had happened. The images, the whispers, the things I had seen, things I couldn't explain. My body couldn't process it. My mind couldn't keep up. It was like the world had suddenly gone off its axis, spinning in a direction I couldn't follow. I stumbled out of the room, my vision blurred by tears that I didn't even remember shedding. I was losing it. I was failing. What was happening to me, to her, to us? There was a door at the end of the hallway, an exit, or at least I hoped. I didn't care anymore. I didn't know how much more of this I could take, this nightmare that was too real to be a dream. I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to be anywhere else, but the door wouldn't open. I tried. I slammed my hands against the handle, pushing with everything I had left. My vision went dark for a second, but the pressure, the fear, it didn't stop. "Let me out!" I screamed, though it came out as a rasping whisper, barely audible. The door wouldn't budge. And then, in that suffocating silence, I heard it again. The voice. This time, it wasn't JLO's. It wasn't the assistant. It was something darker, something twisted. It came from behind me, from deep in the hallway. "There's nowhere to run." I spun around, breathless, frantic. But there was no one there. No one except the shadows, stretching longer, curling against the walls, reaching toward me like hungry hands. I was trapped. I slammed my fists against the door again, harder this time, as if I could break through the walls of whatever hell I had walked into. The force of it sent shockwaves through my chest, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. My heart was racing. Sweat slicked down my back. I could feel every muscle in my body screaming, pushing me to move, to fight, to escape. But the more I tried, the tighter the room seemed to get. The walls were pressing in again. The shadows were closing in on me, surrounding me, and I couldn't make them stop.
That's when I heard it. The faintest sound at first, something just beyond the range of hearing. It was low, almost a hum, but it wasn't coming from the lights anymore. It wasn't even coming from the room.
It was coming from inside me. My chest tightened. The sound, the vibration, the echo. It was like something was calling me, but it wasn't just my body. It was like the entire room had started breathing with me, pulling me deeper into the madness.
I wanted to scream again, but I couldn't.
There was nothing left to do, nothing to say.
And then, through the madness, I heard it. Clearer now. A voice, a whisper cutting through the thick air. "You're not going anywhere." And that's when I knew. I couldn't escape. I don't know how long I've been running from this. I thought I could escape it, that I could leave it behind like some nightmare that fades in the light of day. But it's still here. It's still with me, lurking in the shadows of my mind, in the corners of every room I walk into. I still hear the hum sometimes, that buzzing, that vibration. It's not just in my head. I know it's not. It's everywhere now, and I know. Deep down, it's waiting, watching, waiting for me to slip up again, to fall into that space where it can reach me. You can't escape it. Not really. It doesn't let you go, and maybe that's what's scarier. The idea that what I saw wasn't some isolated event. Maybe it's been following me all along, just waiting for the right moment. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me, but I know this. It's still here, and I don't think it's ever going to let me go.